we don't have time to be polite anymore. Let's just start calling a spade and just get to work, you know?
With that speed.
12 years to limit devastating global warming. Final call to save the world from climate catastrophe. Major climate report describes a strong risk of crisis as early as 2040. If you've been paying any attention to the news, chances are that you've been exposed to these alarming headlines attempting to convey the essence of the latest scientific report on climate breakdown. As the latest of a series of harrowing climate stories that this year has brought to us, the IPCC special report on 1.5 degree, which summarizes the consensus view of all scientists working on climate, once again reinforces the notion that our current collective approach at tackling this crisis is utterly inadequate and adds the weight of scientific legitimacy to our movement. For this episode, we decided to get together with a number of our campaigners for Fossil Free Glasgow to take a stab at the report and discuss its conclusion, its implications, but also its assumptions. I'm Mathieu, I use the pronouns he, him, and I will be facilitating this discussion. So, to begin with, we all read the reports before having this discussion, right? So I thought we could maybe start with a roundtable of our reactions to the report. So if one of you wants to start, then maybe please introduce yourself by giving your name, your preferred pronouns, and talk about what it is about this reading that left the strongest impression on you.
I'm Zara. I use she, her pronouns. And my reaction is just like, wow, cool. Like, what are we supposed to do with this information? Like, it's not good reading, is it?
I'm Louise. I use the pronoun she, her. I kind of knew a lot of what was already in this. I'd assumed it myself, so having it written down was helpful. But something that I find alarming about it was the reference to nature and biodiversity and different things as ecosystem services. The only time that anything outside of the human race was mentioned was as ecosystem services. It made me feel so sick that at a policy level this is an acceptable thing to call the rest of the earth.
So I'm Jenny. I also use she, her pronouns, and this report was impossible to read. It was too long and too complicated, and I actually found the headlines version of it a bit easier to understand. But what I found good about the report was that it actually addresses the fact that the effects of climate change are going to affect the global south more and the poorer areas more, and the extent to which it's going to affect these areas and locations depends on our response to climate change. And I did not expect to read that in the report, and that was kind of a nice surprise in all the awfulness.
I'm Scott. I use the pronouns he, him. I guess when I sort of read it, they kind of mapped out the responses or the carbon emissions necessary for us to get to this sort of 1.5 degrees target, and they gave a range of possible projections. But even taking the most conservative ones, they made it pretty clear that we have to reduce our carbon emissions ASAP. And if you take those implications seriously, then that kind of means profound and radical change of society. But I guess on the flip side is that they seem quite tied to things like economic growth that are kind of what are causing the problems, and they don't really acknowledge it. So in a sense, I'm okay, that's great, you've put this really sort of kind of, in a sense, bold message. But on the other hand, it also kind of reinforces a sense of institutional failure around this issue, and the idea that really things aren't going to get solved. And I've not really got much time for that position now. I don't think any of us have much time for that anymore.
Similar for me. It was interesting that the report felt much like a call to arms, that the scientists of the world were giving the legitimacy for revolution to take place, because it's as if they mentioned, one of the positive things in the report is that they mentioned that the current CO2 levels in the atmospheres will most likely not be enough to go above 1.5. So it means that there is still the chance to actually limit catastrophic global warming, but that it all depends on what we're going to do in the next decade. And the only way to actually change the course of society within the decade would be to massively abolish the current systems and change all of that. So it delegitimizes a reformist approach to climate mitigation and gives a strong sense of support for radical social change, systemic change approach.
Can we talk about the time frame? Because that's something that's been like in the headlines a lot, and it sort of keeps coming up, that 12 years to 2040. Like, what significance has that had?
Well, it's funny because when I first heard that in the newspapers, I was like, oh, wow, that's really optimistic. My intellectual understanding of it wasn't like that at all. And the newspapers framed it as this incoming apocalypse, and I was going like, oh wow, we've got more time than what we actually thought. The significance of the time?
Like, in sort of engaging people in the conversation. Because that's one thing, is that the conversation has been, you know, on all sorts of different forms of media, and a lot of people who wouldn't normally be talking about it are talking about it. Yeah.
I mean, like, I've got a nice personal example that after that headline came out, my sister gave me a text message and was like, me and my friends are really worried about climate change, like the 12-year limit was a real bomb, and like, what can we do about it? And yeah, having that sort of engagement from someone that's so close to you is really important. And I think we, as a campaign group, have got loads of messages from particularly young people being like, oh my god, like I really want to join because I didn't realise how deep in we were. One of our campaign groups received a message was like, why do you want to join? And it was because I don't want to die by 2040. Like, and this is genuine fear with a lot of young people at the minute, and I think that's what that time limit has done.
I mean, do you think that fear is like useful? Like, because we've obviously been pretty worried for a while.
I think it's definitely going to be useful, because now that we have like a tangible time limit, it kind of finally makes climate change kind of a real threat that it's here now. And then a lot of people in my Facebook feed at least seem to be reacting to this kind of positively, kind of saying that, okay, we now know that we have 12 years, so now we can finally start actually acting, that we have, since we have like some kind of limit to this crisis, like now is our window.
Yeah, I agree with the fact that having like a stark time limit is actually a call to action, but I do agree with Scott on the fact that like putting this time limit is an overestimation, because we knew before with the previous reports that we had a carbon budget, so the amount of CO2 we can still emit into the atmosphere, to stay under 2 degrees, and that was already around 12 years. And so they've changed the carbon budget to overestimate it, to kind of give the impression that we still have a chance to maintain to 1.5. But if you look at what the carbon budgets that were given in the previous report compared to those that are given in this one, they've basically taken the budgets for 2 degrees and transferred them and made them for 1.5. And that has been done at the cost of like changing the start date of what they consider the pre-industrial revolution. So to kind of give us more of a budget, and also they're taking off the data from the Arctic, because the Arctic warms faster than the rest of the Earth. So they're calculating the 1.5 temperature by skewing the numbers to give the impression that it is still possible to do it. But realistically, we're going to hit it in the next 5 to 10 years.
Well, that is depressing.
One part that was interesting in the report is the specific paragraph where they talk about the carbon budget that they take, and they say a 420 gigaton of CO2 for a 66% chance of hitting 1.5. So that means already the best chance is a 66% chance, so 2/3 of not hitting it. And like this is like going into the nitty-gritty of how the report is written, but they put in brackets behind that sentence medium confidence, and medium confidence implies a 50-50 chance of this thing to be true. So not only is it for a 66% chance of staying under 1.5, but it also a 50-50 chance that this isn't even true. So it's and then they talk about the uncertainty, and there's about a 750 gigaton of uncertainty. So we may already have gone way past the carbon budget, and the 1.5 degree should already be locked into the climate. Or it's possible that we may have more, but it's like this window of uncertainty is so large that we're basically just taking big gambles with how much we're actually allowing ourselves and allowing our economies to continue at the risk of going past it.
Cool, again. Yeah, it's pretty rough to hear. And yeah, like a lot of the kind of manipulation of the kind of numbers and things like that, yeah, it kind of loses a lot of meaning. Like once you kind of realise like a lot of the numbers. And yeah, anyone else feeling a wee bit sick?
Yeah.
Really, like, if that is the case, that's really intellectually like dishonest, right? I mean, imagine being in the time of like the greatest like human catastrophe ever, and you can't even tell it like it is, you know?
I think like this is something we've criticised a bit as a group, is like this holding of information back from the public because they don't want them to react badly. So this is exactly an example of that. It's like, oh, we can't tell them how bad it really is right now because we don't want them to react, or they won't be able to handle that information. And just the time's so past for that, and it's like an elitist attitude that only the academics can handle the information.
I wonder if the report had said that actually it might be too late now, we might already be screwed, then what kind of a different reaction would that have produced in people? Would that have made everybody just say, well, fuck it, it's too late, we can't do anything, so might as well go out like burning it all? Or is this kind of 12 years time still a bit more kind of like hopeful and constructive way of communicating what we need to do to people, or like have people actually do what we need to do?
Yeah, it's a tricky compromise to be made, because on the one hand it's crucial that we stay under 1.5 degrees of rising temperatures, because as they mention in half of the report, the impacts will be already disastrous, and it already means the death of all corals. That's something that's already accounted for in 1.5, and since corals act as nurseries for so many species of fish, it also means a complete plummeting of populations of fish. They also mention that 1.5 degrees is probably the end of ice in the Arctic as well, with the rise of sea levels. And they there's a sentence as well that says that negative emissions will already be required anyway to prevent ocean acidification, sea level rise, and potential Earth system feedbacks at 1.5. So it seems like they've taken this approach of saying it's still possible to maintain under 1.5 because we will have these negative emission technologies, and that's the only thing that makes it possible. So all of the pathways that they propose to actually maintain under 1.5 are assuming massive negative emissions technologies to work in the future.
And how high is their confidence in these technologies? Does it say? Does it have a bracket behind it? They
don't have any confidence in technologies, but it's high confidence that we will need those technologies to stay under 1.5. Yeah. Yeah,
and also what they are not saying is that if we just have negative emission technologies, we can undo all of this and like keep burning all we want. They're saying that to even like maintain the temperature rise under 1.5, we already need to have the technologies. So we can't cop out by saying like technology is going to save us, because technology is already needed, but it's not enough.
I mean, I think there was one pathway suggested that didn't have negative emission technologies with it, and it was also the one pathway that actually looked kind of socially aware in some sense as well. It kind of acknowledged the radical changes required of society, and it meant cutting our emissions quicker, sooner. The fact that we haven't even peaked emissions, even in Scotland, is offensive. Like, we have the capability to do that here, we just don't have the political will. Me and Matthew went to a talk this week by Kevin Anderson, who's done a lot of work about talking about this. He's definitely someone worth looking up on his speeches on YouTube. And he was like, climate change is a political issue now, it's not a scientific one, and we can see that from this report as well.
Yeah, speaking of the politics and the science, like, do you want to talk about like how the world of politics has impacted what type of science it has been possible to do for this report? It's now a political issue, now a scientific issue, and in this report you see that a lot of the assumptions are drawn from a certain political consensus that is not being questioned. Yeah, as you mentioned, Scott, you said that within the whole report, they assume that it is important to make climate mitigation while taking into account the need for economic growth.
Yeah, I mean, like, I guess that is in and of itself profoundly political. And in terms of, like, I mean, I don't know enough about the people who have maybe wrote the report, but I presume they come across a broad spectrum of, like, climate scientists and people who are maybe involved in other sort of forms of sustainability. But it seems pretty glaring to me that that's like a key problem that's underlying all this, say, potential destruction. I mean, destruction is already underway. And it seems like there's quite a lot of omission of that there, and that is ultimately a political thing. And you could sort of say, okay, well, maybe they're scientists, we've got to be objective and stuff, but, you know, bollocks to that. It's, we are in such desperate times, and by actively encouraging economic growth, even if that's decreed by like the UN and so forth, that is a political move, right? Maybe it's not fair to blame individual scientists, because this is like a systemic problem as well. This only speaks towards a sort of symptom of the wider problem. But something needs to change. Yeah, I just kind of get this sort of sense, and I think we all kind of have it as well, is that often politeness kind of is a big part of the climate discourse, and we don't have time to be polite anymore. Let's just start calling a spade and just get to work, you know?
With that spade. I think it'd be nice to kind of like also reflect on how we feel about this as well, because there's a lot of tension just sitting around here having to cope with some of these really difficult conclusions.
Yeah, I feel like I'm like a pretty naturally cautious person, so I've always kind of felt like, yeah, like the situation's pretty bad, but like hoping that it wasn't as bad as I thought. And then this sort of confirmation, no, it is, and it's worse, and there's not really any kind of clear direction on what to do about it. Like, it's a pretty shit feeling.
I didn't get any work done last week. I was just so angry. I was like really trying, and it was just like it was so hard just like showing up to an office and like trying to do some work and being like, oh my god, I need to do something else with my hands. I need to be like out actually talking about this and like trying to rebuild the society that's needed, and actually sitting in front of a computer right now is not helpful.
I actually avoided reading the papers for a while because I just didn't want to read it. And since I've been kind of like for a few years now giving out presentations on this, like what they talk about in this report, but now they have the new numbers and now everybody's talking about it, and it just feels a bit frustrating, like nothing has happened. We just now have new numbers and more urgency. But I guess more people are starting to listen and starting to actually wake up to this reality, which has been nice, but also a bit frustrating because we have been telling you for a while.
Yeah, that's true, because I mean the numbers are not new. We had even starker numbers in the previous report 5 years ago, and but it seems like there's something in in the climate, not in the climate as in the atmosphere, but in this like a social climate. In like you see that more and more people are starting to actually get desperate and there's a growing confidence that like things are not going to last the way they are and the way that people have assumed that they would last forever. And maybe you can see it from the fact that like no matter where you look at it, whether it's at the political level, whether it's the fact that we had like a huge drought this whole summer, like of constant reports on the fact that like 60% of animals have died in the last 40 years, you're constantly bombarded with all these news that tell you that something is wrong with the world. And so maybe like this report, even though it just said the same thing as what's always been said, it just came again at the right time, and so maybe that might mobilize people.
And like, it's that there's a liberation in having to deal with this level of honesty, like a liberation in like, I don't have to go along with societal norms anymore. Like, I don't have to live my life like that. First of all, because these structures are not going to last, but also this mission that we've all been given is actually much more important than what people think of me, what your family perceive that you should have done with your life, what career path is expected of you, and actually it's time to say no to that and to look at how you can be a renewing force within climate breakdown. And I've found that really personally very liberating.
And yeah, there's a sort of simultaneous contradiction, right? So we're kind of facing up to this sort of pain and suffering, whatever, and sort of climate action. But like the sort of personal growth and like the amount of fun I've had with you guys has been like, yeah, it's been life changing. So in a sense, like, although we are relinquishing some things in terms of kind of, I don't know, material benefits of late stage capitalism. You know, we've got the chance to sort of restore so much human connection, and at the end of it, listen, people are there like us that do really want to help and support you, you know, and really want to be there for you. I mean, I used to kind of be on my own with this, and it was really kind of like isolating and not quite sure what to do, not quite sure where to go, and just you would kind of talk to maybe some people around you about it, and they'd be like, "What are you talking about?" You know, talk about the football, Scott. They wouldn't say that explicitly, but you know, you're kind of othered, I think, a little bit. But you know, there are people, us here who don't want to other you.
Yeah, I guess in general it could be said that our reaction to the report has probably been less severe or less negative than a lot of other people's, because we have all acknowledged that a radical system change is needed if we are wanting to cope with the climate chaos ahead, and we are kind of wanting it to happen as well. Like, we know that this system change could not only save us from climate change, but also change things better in social wise, and with our relationship to nature and to each other in general.
Yeah, because there's a lot that comes with it. It's not just about, you know, swatting up on your climate change facts. It's looking at lots of different alternative ways of doing things and of living and of engaging with each other and with the kind of natural environment in like different ways than we have previously.
I mean, it does definitely feel fertile for sort of things to develop and sort of counter movements to come about. My worry is that this will still be like, you know, like, I was going to say like tomorrow's chip paper, but next week's chip paper, or, you know what I mean, like sort of kind of forgotten about and not really, you know, like the way sort of news culture is, everything sort of comes and goes, and then people don't really take any action upon this. Like, just to give a sort of trite example, almost, like, I'm sure the next day the main headline in the newspaper was that person off Strictly Come Dancing who was kissing his dancer, you know, like that's the sort of stuff we're kind of competing against, I guess, and that kind of worries me a little bit.
I think though that's specific, like that headline was there to fill the place of what the news that they should have been given. So that's a very planned, calculated part of like right-wing tabloid media to leave out this information. But I would argue against it being like a forgotten about thing, because it still feels so heavy and people are still talking about it, and that's pretty abnormal for news. Usually after 2 days' time it's passed on, but I think this, within our own communities, this has really left a big mark, and it's given us a lot of legitimacy to talk about.
And I can definitely see, like, at least with the people I see around me, they have, a lot of them who were not interested in this kind of issues before have now clearly kind of opened up, and they're constantly wanting to talk about it and wanting to look at different directions for what they can do.
Because I think that is the question, like, what do we do with this information? And yeah, the amount of things I've seen on like plastic and things like that recently have been like, oh, that's environmentally friendly, let's get on that. And it's like, you know, we need channels for people, we need like actions for people to take, we need like better kind of pathways for people who haven't sort of been involved in these things for so long, you know, that like we need to kind of catch them up to speed pretty quickly.
Yeah, because the fact that the report is so dire doesn't necessarily need to people taking positive action. It's like, if people realize how fucked we are, that doesn't actually mean that, oh, I'm just gonna try to make the world better. Some people might just fall into, either despair or complete hedonistic behavior, thinking, well, since we only have 12 years to live, might as well just spend all my money at the pub. But on the other hand, we do need to be able to provide channels for people to channel that anger and those worries.
I think just to kind of challenge that whole like person reacting quite selfishly, I think we have to also recognise everybody's on a journey and none of us are static. So if that is someone's initial reaction to finding out how close we are to like the mass extinction, that's valid. Like, that's a valid response. It's not a helpful one, but it's still valid, and maybe it's people within their communities and their circles having conversations with that. And one of the main ways of fighting this is just building on human connection and opening up those conversations.
Because I think that despair and that weight is really tricky for people who, I mean, at the moment we're in November in Scotland, like it's a pretty dull time of the year, like, but for people who like generally like have genuine sort of challenges every day, people from marginalised communities, people from areas of multiple deprivation, this is just like another thing on top of this. And you know, it's not like we shouldn't expect that everyone's going to be able to kind of engage with it, I think, in the way that we would love them to, because the kind of systems that are kind of like oppressing them already are kind of preventing a lot of people from being able to have the space and energy and time to actually respond to that. So I think that when we're thinking about what can we do and what can people do, we need to take that into like consideration, that like who are we asking to do what.
Well, like, who are those people? It's like, is it the top 10% is responsible for like 70% of emissions or something? And I know that's 50%. So the top 10% are responsible for 50% of world's carbon emissions. And there's a lot of like debate about how much an individual is responsible for that. But that also kind of points you in the direction of what groups in our societies do have the responsibility to act right now, and that's like middle class, like people who are quite comfortable, that feel really able to travel and to have cars, and are quite consumptive.
Yeah, and the top 10% that Louise was just speaking about as well, like, it's not the super rich, it's the middle class, like you said, it's us, basically. But yeah, even though we know that recycling is not going to be enough, taking care of plastic issues is not going to be enough, and going vegan is not going to be enough, then even it's encouraging to see that people are seeking something that they could do, even though they might be these tiny individualistic things that they are kind of guided towards by the media and society at this point in time.
I mean, those are the acceptable ways of reacting to the climate crisis, isn't it? It's prescribed because it doesn't actually cause any system change. And when I'm like, who are the people responsible? I'm not actually asking for individual changes. I'm asking for people to actually come in groups together and really force change. And the people who have the most power to do that tend to have more resources as well.
It's like Scott said, like, we can't be polite about it anymore, and like, you know, the kind of things that you outlined before, pretty polite ways of doing it, but we don't really have that luxury anymore.
And that's a danger, right? So if like the movement, if like we're saying, like maybe the middle classes have to take some responsibility over it, that's the typical mode of responsibility that they take. Yeah. And that's what we kind of see, right, is the sort of environmental movement is kind of very much individual consumption decisions and very much middle class only. I was going to say middle class led, that's probably underplaying it. It's pretty much just full of middle class people, and that's kind of, I think, something that kind of puts off other people from taking part. That'd be
maybe the question of resilience has to be taken in this, as a bundle with the question of mitigation, because if we ask people in the 10% to reduce their emissions so that we could avoid the worst of the crisis, we also have to ask the people that Zara was talking about, so the people that are already struggling in their day-to-day lives, to actually change the way that they live, so that they can actually be resilient to these crises that are impending. Because if they don't at this time, then they're going to be the worst affected when those disasters that the IPCC report describes are going to come to us.
I think it's just kind of about, like, at least for me, I'm not doing it for other people, but doing it with other people alongside you. And that kind of involves, like, to use a topic word, divesting yourself of a lot of your kind of privilege and stuff, even taking sort of personal risks in your own life. I'm talking about personal material risks, maybe not making as much money or whatever, in order to give yourself the sort of the opportunity and the kind of I don't know how you call it, like the sort of empathy levels to kind of work with other people who maybe are struggling as well. It's a difficult one though.
And simply time.
Yeah,
you need the time.
Yeah, totally.
And I think, like, the empathy needs to be extended to this top 10% as well, because it's very easy to, like, demonise them and, like, but, like, we are them, we have been them, we've done the same things that they've done at a point, and, like, we're talking about building, like, you know, more social connection and things, and that has to include everyone. So we need to really think, because it's difficult, because it's like they and we are causing this, but, like, we have to engage with them, like, in a way that when everything collapses, like, we can, I don't know, but, like, band together. Does that make sense? Like, it.
Yeah, it's a really tricky question, because there's also the question of time, and since, like, we've been talking about the fact that we have so little time, do we move trying to get everyone on board, or do we just move with the people that are actually keen to come along and just leave the people that have been dragging us down behind, and hoping that when this whole society changes, hopefully, then they'll have to adapt to that. So yeah, it's an open question, but personally right now, I'd rather invest all my energy working with the people that are actually keen on doing some things.
I mean, that's where you get the work done.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, but then again, we do need more people. We need a mass movement.
I would argue that a mass movement's already started, like, from the perspective of all the different groups that are popping up in the minute. And you made a comment to me, like, last week. It was like, Louise, we don't need to police all the movements that are happening. It's great that, like, they're spontaneously coming, and even if there's, like, problematic things in their actions, like, at least some of them are happening, and we didn't know about them, and that's really exciting. I think there was, like, last week this, like, group called Extinction Rebellion that's just kind of popped out and is now like encouraging civil disobedience. but with like older white middle class people, which is super weird. Like that's not usually who like stands up to do civil disobedience, and I think there's something quite exciting in that as well. I don't necessarily want them to be leading any sort of movement, but I'm glad that some of them actually can recognise the importance of this.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Should we kind of talk about what this means for our campaign, or how this relates to why we started podcasting instead of lobbying?
I mean, yeah, maybe it relates to that question of who do we decide to work with, and if we understand that like the current systems that are causing the climate crisis are also going to be affected badly by all the disasters that are coming, then it's going to be inconceivable to actually have functional pension funds that will continue to give people the privilege of being able to retire and have a stable income, when the rest of the society and the economy will struggle to actually keep afloat and provide people with their basic needs, such as food and water and heating. So, is it still crucial to invest most of our energy to try to change a structure that we don't even know if it's going to continue to be there for very long?
That's a good question.
I don't know. We've just got to start somewhere, right? We've got to. I mean, this might sound a bit much to people, but like, we've got to attack something. Really, we've got to take on something. And like, if a pension fund that invests in fossil fuels is that thing, and that's enough to sort of spark some sort of wider movement, then that in and of itself is valuable. But we've got to just keep in our minds that this is like stage one of the struggle of like a big mountain that we've got to climb.
I definitely agree with all that you said, because it's really easy to say that this is not a big enough target, but nothing ever is. We can't attack the capitalism or anything like that. Like we can't choose a big enough target. We just have to start somewhere, and a pension fund is already a pretty huge target.
Yeah, I mean, just kind of to go back, because we're talking about the Glasgow Pension Fund and like the fact that they've invested 803 million in fossil fuel companies, and last week The Guardian released an article that said about how Glasgow's roads, city and the hospitals and houses are going to be affected by flooding as a result of climate change, and also by intense and more frequent storms. And it was just like, our city council is investing in that, like that they are actually contributing to that future that they're handing to their own city. So financially it makes literally no sense. But the same week that was happening, Richard Keary, who's like the financial officer for Strathclyde Pension Fund, gave a presentation to city councillors in Edinburgh, and I'm assuming some Glasgow ones were there as well, about how the divestment movement is misguided. Like the Strathclyde Pension Fund is actively going out there and telling our councillors about how this is misguided, but we can't get near them apart from surgeries. And so where is the balance in power in that? Of course they're going to listen to that, because he gets the space to talk to them about divestment and we don't. And the injustice of that is infuriating.
And the reason why it's misguided is not because he has some clever political insight into how we can solve climate change. He says it's misguided because currently fossil fuel industries still make a profit, so we should keep investing in them because that's how we make a profit.
Yeah, and that's not like reading in between the lines. That's actually what they say. Like, we only care about making a profit. That's what this pension fund is for. We are not allowed to take any ethical considerations into account, which is ridiculous.
So is our pension funds ethical then? Is it actually ethical for people in the city to receive a pension fund? And actually looking at the numbers and what Strathclyde Pension Fund is investing in, it's not. It's just not.
That might be going kind of away from the original conversation.
No, but I think like maybe I don't know, 'cause it's kind of valid in as much as like the way pension funds operate with their sort of profit-driven model. Just even if you ignore the fact that they're investing in fossil fuels, in and of themselves, that's still like so unsustainable. Chasing profits leads to, at some level in the sort of chain of command, you're going to be using fossil fuels anyway to fuel those profits. So in a sense, like the way pension funds operate full stop is abysmal for the environment, right?
But yeah, maybe we want to keep the conversation focused on whether, like, knowing the timeline of climate change because of what we learned from this report is actually in line with the system of a pension fund, or is our campaign fulfilling a different role?
So the reason that we started podcasting was that we all felt like going after the pension fund, like one pension fund alone, is not enough. And now with these new IPCC papers, that's definitely clear. Like, divesting one pension fund is not acting fast enough. And we figured that it's more important for people to hear about the climate movement in Scotland, and people to hear that there's people who are doing something about it, and that you can come together and start doing something about it.
Also, this just feels better than any of our previous strategies. It just, it's been really difficult and like really frustrating, like finding out all the kind of issues around the kind of democracy of it, and this feels better to be able to talk about it and share it, and hopefully reach more people.
Yeah. And we know that divesting Strathlife Pension Fund is not going to be enough, but this is what we're doing, this is what we're structuring our activities around. And while campaigning for the divestment of that one pension fund, we're also reaching a lot of people, hopefully empowering a lot of people to get active.
Yeah, we've been repeating that maybe like this strategy alone is not enough, but so maybe we can talk about what we would consider to be enough to actually rise to this challenge.
Do you mean like rise to the overall climate challenge?
Yeah.
I mean, systemically, like, geez, I don't know, man. You're talking about a whole system change, right? And we are a bunch of five hardy individuals, part of like a sort of wider network of maybe 15 or 20 people that are maybe just kind of trying to work on it. But yeah, to achieve that level of like complex system change, I don't know where to start, man. I don't know where to start, other than just to keep on working.
Yeah, I guess we just need to stop burning fossil fuels.
So go fossil free. No.
Well, it's interesting that you say that, Scott. That the only thing that we can do right now is to keep working at it. And I feel like this is kind of the mindset in which most of the young environmental organizations working on environmental issues have been thinking, that they know very well that the work that they're doing is not going to be enough, but yet they like keep at it because that's the best thing you can possibly do. But maybe that's like. That would cloud our vision as well and prevent us from actually seeing what could be transformative and the kind of structures that we could completely create from scratch.
I mean, personally, how I really feel that work I should be doing now is building community resilience. Because by building community resilience, you also then become less dependent on the fossil fuels that are destroying the rest of the world. So really what I'd like to be doing is going out in Glasgow and trying to literally build and modify things that people could live in a way that was renewing and not destructive. But then that brings into the whole question about, can cities ever be renewable as well?
Renewable?
Yeah, like renewing.
Yeah.
I think that's something that's like worth, I guess, like to a certain extent, what I mean by keep on working is don't do the same thing over and over again. Be self-reflective and experiment, try new things, try creative ways of doing things, whether that's taking on power or whether that's like sort of projects of resilience building.
I don't know, kind of like going back to Matthew's point, that idea is so overwhelming that if your target is not big enough, then just stop targeting it, kind of. Because I at least I don't know what else we could do. Like, what would be the unclouded vision that we could be working for? I have No
Yeah.
idea.
Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that we have to go for the big target, because there's none, as you said. But it's like, for me, right now, this campaign isn't so much about the target, it's about the process. And the process itself is the creation of a new structure. It's like, by organizing around this target that we know to be insufficient, then we are actually developing the ways in which a fossil-free society could look like. And that implies like putting different systems in place of how to interact with each other, how to actually create egalitarian ways of interacting, and things that we've been developing in our meetings are actually a goal in themselves, but we've achieved that without actually focusing on achieving it, which was quite brilliant.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that.
We got anything else positive to kind of end on? Because this has been rough.
Yeah.
Maybe we can just do a round table and giving an advice to the listener on what they could potentially do if they feel depressed by all this despair that they've been experiencing from this report. Yes, Zara?
Yeah, find a group like this. This has been one of the most important things for me in this kind of journey is finding like a really good group of, diverse and different people, all with a kind of same, like, we have a lot of different ideas about things, but the same kind of like broad vision for where we want to go. And actually, like, we're talking about like a lot of facts and figures and a lot of kind of really big, difficult things, but we don't often focus a lot on the feelings and the emotions and everything, which are just like as important in this battle that we've got coming. So if you can find a group who really supports and nourishes that, even if it is just eating together once a week, or just having someone to kind of talk to when you are feeling like this, that would be my advice. Form some groups.
Yeah, definitely agreed. Just maybe go online, Google environmental campaign in your area, or whatever campaign or group, or just a group of people that you can get access to and get together. If you don't have that kind of a group, then find even one person who is kind of feeling the same and make one. Just kind of come together and try and work towards something.
Yeah, you don't know what you'll achieve, do you, really? I mean, like, you and Matthew and Jenny have been part of the Fossil Free Glasgow group for ages, right? And I guess there was times that it didn't look like much was happening. But like, if you guys didn't stick at it, then we wouldn't be here doing this podcast, and we wouldn't be together, we wouldn't know each other, we wouldn't have all this connection and great stuff that we can hopefully build on. So
Yeah.
it's difficult, because you never get like that sort of instant feedback with these sort of things all the time, but like often what you're doing is really, really important.
Yeah, literally just show up.
Well, I guess my advice would be as bold as you can possibly think. Because, I mean, this whole, looking at the scale of the challenge is so incomprehensible that we can't just limit ourselves to having an unfulfilling life, I'd say, because we'll have to do something that completely engages us to try to change the way that the whole society is organized. So, and because everything is going to change, we might as well try to make it so that it's actually quite fulfilling to live in. So, everything's up for grabs now.
My advice is kind of furthering from Matthew, and it's like, live with radical honesty. And that can be quite difficult, but it's actually like, just be honest with yourself and look at your life and change it. And I mean, that means showing up to spaces, and if someone says something that's really, problematic, or challenge it, like, be that voice in the room and just live your life as honestly as you possibly can. Fuck social norms.
Yay!
That's an excellent point to end on.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. If you want to find out more about our campaign, sign a petition, or get informed whenever we release a new episode, you can find us on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram at Fossil Free Glasgow.